Hi, everybody. Welcome to a live webinar with James Kho from NBCUniversal. I'll introduce myself. My name is Aram Melkoumov, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Crowdlinker. Really happy for everybody to be here today. I'm going to give you a quick kind of agenda in terms of what we're going to cover. I'm going to quickly introduce myself, Crowdlinker, the Fireside chat event series that we're doing, introduce the topic and the guest that we have here today, and cover some housekeeping items before we get started into the gist of it. And we have a really exciting conversation that we're going to be doing with James today. So I'm thrilled to have him on. So I'll quickly introduce myself. So as I said, I'm Aram Melkoumov. I'm the CEO of Crowdlinker. I've been in the tech space for about 13 years. I'm a technologist at the core. I've created a few different startups. Crowdlinker is my third business as an entrepreneur. We initially kind of started off as a tech startup building our own products, but then we evolved into becoming an award-winning digital product design and software engineering studio. Our team's primarily based in Toronto, and I'm actually in Barcelona, and James is actually in California. So big time difference between us, but we have, different audience members from different areas of the world joining us today and who are going to be, listening in via the recording that we're going to share later. So I'm really excited to have everybody on. Quickly about what we do, a bit of a shameless plug here. I hope everybody's okay with that and not have any cringe-worthy moments here. But, we started, as a product studio, we really kind of focus on ideation, validation of product ideas for a lot of the companies that we work with as partners. We help them kind of drive innovation and drive new experimental development. And then we carry that forward then into the design side of our service offering, and then to the software engineering side, where we actually build the products that we come up with. And then we have a marketing team that pushes it out then to the target ICP. And we work with companies across all industries, primarily SMEs, across different verticals. So we're very kind of agnostic in terms of the products that we build. We've worked on everything from fintech to OTT and e-commerce and video streaming. So I'm really actually happy to say that we are working with NBC on a really cool new product that I unfortunately can't share with everybody, but we will be announcing it and hopefully rolling it out very soon. So I'll keep everybody posted on that. To jump into what the purpose of this Fireside chat series is simply, we've been in the business for 8 years, and we've worked with a lot of businesses of all sizes, primarily startups and scale-ups. And more recently, we've been working with enterprises. And what we saw was that startups and scale-ups have a very dynamic community, access to a lot of knowledge, a lot of people who can share their learnings and findings and their know-how with each other, like very freely. And we just felt that on the enterprise side, that was a bit missing. There was a very kind of siloed approach. It's hard to access that information and people and the mindset of what they do in their organizations from an innovation standpoint. And so we wanted to create these like weekly Fireside chat series that we're going to be doing till the end of the year, and really get people to come in from their own organizations and really talk about what they're doing in innovation, how they're driving it in their organizations, and kind of share their learnings that way, and let everybody improve in terms of how to be a better product leader or an innovator in their companies. So that's kind of how we came to be here today, and we've had 2 so far. James is our 3rd, so part of the guinea pig process.
Lucky number 3.
Number 3, yeah, lucky number 3. And we'll keep everybody posted, now that you've signed up to the series, in terms of like the great speakers that we have lined up. So I'm going to talk about the topic today, and then the great speaker that we have, and then just some housekeeping. Before I do that, I'm just going to quickly throw up a poll that we have. It would really kind of help us gauge in terms of where everybody's coming from, what they're willing to learn, and things like that. I'll keep that running until the intros are done, and then I'll turn it off so that it's not a distraction and that everybody can focus on the gist of our conversation. So the topic that we have today is staying agile during COVID, growth pains. it's a very exciting topic because we're going to learn in terms of what James and his team at NBC have done with their cross-functional, experience that they have in their team about staying, nimble during everything that's happened in the last year, in 2020 so far. So we're going to really dive deep into that. And so James, who we have on the call with us, is a senior manager of product development at NBCUniversal, primarily in digital distribution. And he's going to be kind of sharing some of the insights that we have there. And quick housekeeping items, we'll be sharing this recording after with everybody, so that you could review this later. And after we process it and put it on our YouTube channel, we'll let you know what the link is. There is a live Q&A component to this webinar, so you can start putting together your questions that you have for James around in about 25-30 minutes from now, and then our team members internally are going to go through these questions, and then we'll try to cover as many as we can before we wrap up. There is a survey that's going to be coming out at the end of this webinar when we finish it. I would really appreciate it and love it if you could please complete it so that we can learn in terms of what to do better and how to improve the process. So yeah, that's it on the housekeeping side. I'm going to now close up the poll. So thanks everybody for your answers. We have a couple more coming in. So while that's coming in, I'll kind of jump into introducing our speakers. So James, awesome. Thank you so much for being here. I'd love it if you can kind of start off introducing yourself, what you do at NBC in your role, and where you're based also, so that everybody knows.
Yeah, and thanks for inviting me, Aram. I really appreciate this. Super exciting. I know we're currently working on a project together, but it's kind of nice to just kind of sit in this like fireside chat and be able to kind of hopefully educate, right, and provide some knowledge on the stuff that we're doing as part of NBCUniversal and what my team is doing under product. So my official role is product development, but like a lot of my peers, especially recently, I wear multiple hats. My role, I feel like, is a combination of business and tech. I look at analytics. I write out PRDs. I present business proposals to leadership. And kind of managing and supporting various projects, both on the business side and also on the tech side. And that kind of list kind of goes on. I think the numerous responsibilities that I have at this company, especially in NBCU, is, something that I really enjoy and appreciate, right? Because, it's just like you're working with like so many teams, marketing, BI, work my own product team frequently, working with leadership. I'm aware, right, and responsible for like all these multiple layers of information that I either have to report up, to executives, or kind of share with my coworkers, or drive some kind of strategic decision. And I think as part of product, you're like a mini CEO, right? You kind of make decisions based on data, and I'm sure you're kind of aware of that as CEO. It's great. I think it's a great experience at NBCUniversal, and working on a lot of cool, great projects pertaining to entertainment.
Nice, awesome. Thank you so much for the intro, James. First question I have is, how did you get started in product and innovation? I know you worked previously at a startup.
Right.
Like, how did you kind of get into it? Like, what made you kind of, jump 2 feet into product innovation?
Yeah, and this was like 10 years ago, I think. But I had an opportunity to work at a global startup back then. The business model was very similar to like a Groupon business model, where they offer flash deals, right, to local customers, but kind of global in that our platform was live in like six, 7 different countries. So I actually first started working there more on the tech side. So it was like more development, more QA. And I remember we were leveraging the LAMP tech stack. I don't even know if anyone ever even use that anymore, for our backend. Yeah, we use it. Okay, that's good to know. And then that role kind of transitioned, right? So like 6 months in, it started transitioning towards more product, and that's because they had a need for product owners, right? Because I mean, we were super lean. I think in our LA team, there was something like a dozen of us, and there's like remote teams, offshore teams elsewhere.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like how I got into it. I worked there for a couple of years. I really became interested in
Nice.
product, more specializing in like innovation, technology, and that kind of how that men lines into business.
Yeah.
I went back to get my MBA, a few years back, and I think it's a good combination, right? I started with tech and just kind of like blending in, merging, a little bit of business background. I think it provides a really robust, I guess you could say resume, kind of moving forward. And I've like jumped industries, right? So I was doing that startup, and then I kind of dived into fintech for a few years, and then went over to e-commerce, and then kind of residing where I'm now within the entertainment industry.
And what, it's a pretty diverse background you have,
Yeah.
coming from technical to product. What advice would you have for someone moving from like a startup to an enterprise in an innovation role?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you just have to be open-minded and think about what tools and skill sets you kind of garnered coming from a startup environment, right? Especially now, right? Because everyone is just trying to be a lot leaner. People wearing multiple hats and trying to get stuff out there. And that's the same as like startups, right? They're lean and efficient. They don't have all the money in the world, right? To become successful. They need to be cognizant of cost and timing and making sure, that, everything is driving a high ROI and a hopefully low LOE.
Yeah.
And, going into an enterprise, corporate, you have to think about, can you automate anything, right? Can you reduce steps? Can you like decrease LOE for a certain product? Like, I think people really look for, employees from startups just because they have that mentality.
Yeah, the mindset.
Right? Yeah, I mean, having that mindset of, what you need to get this done, within this budget, right? Within these kind of resource coming in, whether it's like internal or external. How do you kind of like keep things, on schedule? But I mean, one thing that I've noticed, right, kind of coming from our startup and going into more enterprise and corporate environment is, I mean, the business part is a bit slower for sure, right? I mean, I remember working at the startup, I was reporting to the CTO, and then it's a pretty quick process, kind of going back and forth.
Yeah.
So there's definitely more steps, but I think, I kind of see that as a good thing, right? So at NBC, there's definitely, we spend a lot more time just kind of vetting, right? Vetting business ideas, business proposals, taking less risks, right? Because, it impacts a lot of people, right? Not just like my coworkers, my peers, but impacts a lot of customers. So that's kind of where the vetting comes in. Does it really, really make sense? And do our higher ups, all the multiple layers of executives, do they like agree that this is something that would be successful? And it's kind of like where the open mind is going to come into play, because you want to be flexible, but also be patient. You'll still get to the same hopefully positive results from that. You're working with more and bigger teams. Sometimes you just have to go with the flow, in an enterprise environment.
Awesome. That's really interesting. I mean, NBC is such a large organization. We're going to learn, and you're going to tell us a bit more about the processes in terms of how that happens. But I want to kind of jump into the meat and potatoes of around the whole growth pains that you guys went through, and how it's affected the business. So when COVID hit the whole world as a pandemic, a lot of people and companies started really struggling in terms of figuring out. They had to some closed down, some pivoted, some adapted to the whole environment. So there was a lot of change that happened. But I know in your situation, in being in the digital distribution side and the content side of things,
right?
Your department specifically, where you are, really kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, really kind of benefited from the side effects of what's happened. Increased streaming and things like that. How has your team dealt with this whole acceleration process? and this growth that you've seen so far? Because I know like it's one of the fastest growing departments at NBC. So like, how did that transpire?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I'm sure like a lot of companies kind of going through the, same phase that we are. I mean, I'm just trying to think. I think we started working from home like 6, 7 months ago, right? Or maybe like 9 months ago, like back in March.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, I think everyone, was just trying to think of, oh no, what we're going to do. Like it's going to impact theatrical, it's going to impact, the various delivery processes and whatnot. We and I'm sure some of you guys are aware of this, but we pushed out this new window called PVOD. And PVOD stands for Premium Video on Demand, and essentially just streaming, right? It's streaming from one of your platforms at home, whether it's like Roku or one of the other studios platforms.
Yeah.
And what we did was we kind of provided earlier windows for our customers to access certain movies, right? Due to the fact that movie theaters shut down, people can't go anywhere. Everyone's staying at home. They want their kids to be safe. So so we were really busy. I remember just that first few months of just making sure that the businesses are aligned. We're communicating with our retailers, right? That hey, you know what, we're going to be doing this. Got a great idea. Like let's make this happen. A lot of my coworkers were working like over the weekend, with the communications, with the delivery processes, the product team like itself as well. So it was challenging, I think, right? It's really challenging to get something launched quickly. It is kind of like startup mode, right? It's like you have, different iterations. And it's like, oh, hey, you know what? We need to be lean. We need to be agile. We need to push this out next Monday. You have 4 days to like get everything up and running. All the retailer has to be aligned. So there's like tons of communication. And, I think we did a really great job. I was like partially part of it, but it was really like our accounts team, our ops team that's kind of like, hey, what kind of driving this, and we kind of consider it a new business, right? The fact that people can actually stream within this window that is a lot closer to theatrical. But I feel like we handled it pretty well, and it's most likely something that's going to be moving forward, kind of like within our business portfolio to be able to kind of provide titles within its PVOD window.
And so like, I mean, it's great having you on the call because, and I don't know if the audience is curious, but like, there's so much change happening right now with the whole side of where content is going. Like a lot of movie theaters in the UK and the US are closing. Lots of jobs are at stake. Disney, it pushed up Mulan, which was like a huge production, to Disney exclusively, with a premium, attached to it. And then I know Trolls, like the latest Trolls movie also went under this approach. So
Yes.
like a lot of content, a lot of movies, like even like, movies that are intended for the theaters are going to these new experiences. So like some people are saying like, okay, it's going to be the end of theaters entirely. Like if this thing drags on, like, how long can they last? What's kind of like your take on the underlying consumer behavior change driving these trends? And like, how far do you think it will go?
Yeah, and, this is just like my perspective, right? Not NBCUniversal's perspective, but just from kind of reading all the articles and just talking to friends, coworker, family. I think this new user behavior is here to stay, right? I think a lot of it's going to be permanent.
Wow.
And the reason I'm saying that is because people realize that there are other ways, right? There are just so many options. Like I'm just going to talk about the movie experience, right? There's just so many ways to watch a movie. These days, you don't have to drive to the movie theater, to watch a movie. Not saying that's not like a great experience, because I love watching movies like in IMAX or like Adobe, right? And if for those like big titles, I definitely want to go out there and watch them. And I mean, I want to watch a movie like this year that's coming out, but I'm probably not going to because I don't feel like it's safe. So think about all the families that have kids. I mean, what are they going to do, right? I mean, they're probably going to stream something at home, until everything's like decently safe. I don't feel like movie theater is going to go get back to 100% capacity. I mean, I think they will reopen, right? I mean, it's like on and off, right? One week you're hearing that movie theaters are opening, another week you're hearing that movie theaters are closing, like UK right now, right? I mean, their COVID spike. So I'm assuming something is that it's going to be, the business is going to be challenging over there from a theatrical chain's perspective. And just kind of talking about technology, right? There's like an increase in familiarity of digital products, right? Higher adaptation, using various platforms to stream, doing the FaceTimes that everyone's doing right now. I think everyone just like really used to, well-versed with technology now, work, right? Zoom, Teams, whatnot. I think that's here to stay, really, And then, so I do feel like, yeah, it does, not to be insensitive, it does provide an opportunity for, our studio to kind of like capitalize on this, right? You mentioned Milan, you mentioned Trolls, and, any kind of other pivot titles moving forward. I mean, there is a larger population that's, that's receiving entertainment at home, right? So we have a larger population to kind of leverage, and that that leads to kind of revenue, right? We talk about price points as well, right? What's the best price point for these people? We don't want to scare them away. We want to incentivize them to pick up these movies. Like pivot titles are a little more expensive, right? And that not just because obviously it's closer to theatrical, and whatnot, but it is definitely a great opportunity for us, and it is really due just kind of like the consumer behavior changing, and some of that kind of staying around, in the long term.
Mm-hmm. And with all this change happening, how do you see your role changing post-COVID? Do you think it'll go back to normal? Do you think it'll stay as course and you're just going to keep doubling down on this kind of channels and these new opportunities that you have? Where do you think you're going to spend kind of more time or less time? Any indications?
Yeah, and I think I mean we're going through this right now, right? Obviously, like we're kind of like 9 months in, and we're looking at budget, for the next few years. I think we're all, and it's not just me, right? I mean, this is just like everyone on my team, everyone within digital distribution, the whole NBCUniversal entity. We need to think about just new business opportunities, right? With the different user behavior. We need to kind of dedicate more time to figure out, is there any, current traditional methods to drive revenue, and also like new channels, right? New business development, working with new vendors. How do we support, the rest of the company with revenue generation, right? I've been at NBCUniversal for about 4 years now, right? So I definitely manage a lot of like the back end platforms, right? And just kind of providing support, so I'm already seeing this, right? Just like in the beginning of the year, seeing the transition of my time spent on kind of managing that, stuff that we're trying to automate, trying to make more efficient, over to like new business ideas, right? How can we drive revenue? Like, how can we leverage, bonus content? I mentioned like CPE. How do we leverage CPE to, for higher engagement with the customers, for a possible transactional opportunity, right, on different platforms. I think that's where our head needs to kind of be in, just kind of stay on track, right? And obviously, this is not just like a domestic challenge; it's like a global challenge, right? I mean, our company is universal, global, right? So this is definitely something. I mean, it's a good challenge too, right? Just trying like, oh wow, I think this is exciting, right? I come from a product background, but hey, you know what kind of new product or existing product I can develop or create fresh that would drive new business or support the traditional business, right? It could go either way. I mean, we have, different buckets of like businesses, right? Pivot is one of the new ones. The traditional, we have all the STs. So like, it could be a product idea either way, and idea comes from everywhere, right? It could come from you, it could come from me, it could be from a paid intern. So, to me, it's like exciting times on this change and fluctuation.
So it's a great segue into another question I have. You talk about like how ideas flow within your organization. Can you speak more about, the process around that, that from an idea to actually like something launching, like what happens, like what's the process from like the business needs perspective and things like that?
Yeah, so I kind of mentioned like just a different business channels right now, right? So, when I'm thinking of ideas, I'm thinking about it in like three buckets. We have a very traditional business that's just kind of like ongoing. It's kind of like our like cash cow. And I don't know like if any of you guys like went through business school or learned about it, but there's like quadrants. Traditional business, and there's like the new pivot business, and there's also like alternative EST, that we're kind of building out. The idea just come from there, right? I mean, a lot of it, it's really like I've been in this industry for a few years, right? So I kind of understand kind of like the core business, but then also bring in all the other ideas and concepts I've learned from other industries. So fintech, right? And I have like a lot of my business proposals in the past, I have kind of brought up like just kind of different ideas and projects that I, worked on, fintech, e-commerce, like startups, and everything kind of originates from idea, right? I kind of had to document everything, right? There's a business proposal that I kind of put together. And I look at, different data, right? Some data internally, like, hey, I gotta prove this out, right? And so we definitely use numbers a lot, and everyone does. Like, there's a lot of data that you have to kind of bring up, right? What's the KPI? What's the value? Like, what's the population? And a proposal like that, gets pitched to my boss, to the executives, and that's where they kind of like go back and forth in terms of kind of reviewing before it gets greenlit. So there's a lot of like, I think, from my perspective, there's a lot of documentation before and after the greenlit, right? Because you gotta kind of propose that idea, put it on paper, present it, PowerPoint, whatever.
Yeah.
And then after, it's kind of like, hey, you know what? This got approved, this got greenlit, and just in terms of like resources, right? So you gotta think about the budget. You gotta think about the human resources, right? Committed, who's managing. Yeah, so it's all of that, right? And then there's a lot of documentation after. So product, obviously we create PRDs, wireframes, mock-up, test cases, and it kind of goes through, if it's something technical, it kind of goes through the software development lifecycle, right? And we're working with vendors, whether it's internal or external.
Okay. And like, is there any specific kind of like best practices you could recommend to others in terms of how to pitch a new idea? Like from terms of presenting the data behind it or the process or framework, any kind of tips that you could share?
Yeah, and I think you need to know what the goal is of this product, right? And what is the value that's driving it? Is the goal to drive revenue? Is the goal to drive engagement? Is the goal to acquire new customers, right? There could be all these like different goals. And then from there, you kind of dictate, okay, in order to get to this goal, like what do you have to do? What are the next steps? What kind of resources do you need? What kind of budget? What kind of technology, do you require? I mean, I do have kind of like a laundry list of like, like kind of like checklist of like what I kind of go down. I brought up the cash cow, and it's like, right now we're looking for cash cows, right? What's going to kind of drive that revenue? But that doesn't mean it has to be a cash cow. It could be, in a quadrant where it just kind of provides presence, right? Within a brand, or presence within an industry.
Okay.
Competitive challenge, right? The Porter's 5 forces. I mean, I don't utilize all of that because I don't think it's really all necessary, but you got to think about, where's the population at, right? Who's out there already that's like super competitive? Like, can you even like get into that market? With like, we talk about apps a lot, right? I mean, there's like tons of apps out there, right? Like, how many of us is going to keep an app and use it long term versus, you know what, I'm going to click into it a couple of times and I'm going to delete it, or it just sits like on page 3 or 4 and we never use it again.
Mm-hmm.
You got to think about all these like challenges, right? The UI, the UX, There's a lot to think about, obviously. So obviously I can't like share everything that I kind of go through, but
Believe me,
a lot of decks that I can present, it's like, 10, 20 pages, there's a lot of details because, that's what is expected, right? Coming from a product person, you need to kind of look at um, the product, the new product, in different angles, different perspectives, from business side, from the tech side, operations, resources, and whatnot.
and as like a person internally driving the initiative and kind of putting it out there to get approval, how do you yourself and to your team show, or to the company, how do you show ROI on any kind of products that you guys create? Like, what are you measuring?
Yeah, so kind of going back to engagement and transactional, right? So CPE, the bonus content that kind of manage, we definitely look at the engagement quite a bit, right? So for example, one of the KPIs that we looked at is how many people transacted and also interacted with the bonus content. So meaning that someone, they could be on, someone purchased one of our titles, right? And then they move forward and kind of played around with our games, with 360 experiences. Like, how often does that happen, right? And we see that, obviously with our tenfold titles, there's definitely higher engagement, and also if we build out more robust interactives, we see higher engagement. And higher engagement is sometimes like what we want to see, right? You go into like a Best Buy or Target, sometimes you pick up a DVD because it says, on the marketing, promo, 3 hours of additional bonus content, right? That's kind of stuff that we kind of strive for. Some kind of correlation to a transaction, right? I mean, if a person's willing to spend a few dollars more because there's like this additional hours of entertainment for themselves, for the kids, then they'll purchase that, right? And that leads to a transaction. So that's like one KPI. And just from a digital codes, like we sell digital codes online, right? And that's definitely just purely transactional, right? Like, are we getting, just from marketing, social, are we, what kind of conversion are we looking at, right? How many people are dropping off, right? How many people are coming back? How many people are, spending money on multiple purchases, right? Because we don't want just like a customer coming in and be like, okay, you know what? I'm only gonna buy this like one item and then that's it, I'm never coming back. We want them to come back, right? We want them to be a multiple buyer, right? Repeat buyer. So that's like a huge KPI for us as well. And to kind of present these tools, we use Excel, obviously, most companies use that. We have Power BI, which is a pretty cool like tool that we use internally that I think is really great to kind of pull in raw data. And and different teams look at different numbers as well. But there's definitely a lot of we look at data quite a bit, especially data distribution. Like everyone has to be pretty experienced and know how to read numbers. Okay. Right? I mean, I'm not an expert myself for sure, right? I'm not an expert myself. I'm used to like internal data warehouses that it's a little easier, right? But yeah, Excel spreadsheet, everyone needs to know how to use Excel, hopefully use Power BI. And that's just kind of the communication aspect of it too, right? You gotta be able to know how to communicate and then also kind of like the response, how to digest, right? Data coming from your team members.
And so when you're coming up with some ideas or even like internally in the organization, how do you involve your own team members, whether in the innovation team or even outside of the innovation team that you're part of, to come up with some of these ideas? Like how do you kind of help gauge this drive towards ideation?
Yeah, and I think just as a product guy, I ask a lot of questions, right? So kind of going back to like when I think of an idea, right? When I think of idea, I sometimes like type out all the questions I have, right? And I just go to the different teams, right? I get their input. I go to the tech team for questions. I go to my own product team for questions, marketing, BI. It's kind of gathering, right? I'm a hub, right? product guy, typically they're a hub, they're interacting with all these different people. I learn from them, they learn from me. And that's kind of like where you kind of involve just people internally, right, with their idea. Ideas can come from anywhere. So like, even if I came up with like a really cool idea, that doesn't mean that someone else can make it better, right? From a marketing perspective, from a technology perspective, or like a data perspective. So, I lean in, into those discussions and try to make this product, better than what it originally was, what the original idea was. Okay. And externally, it's also the same thing, right? I talk to you, when we have, like questions, and just like, hey, what, collectively, how do we kind of build out something, right? And I mean, it is all about teamwork, right? I mean, like, I'm not doing all this on my own, right? I can't, right? I don't have the expertise, to do everything. But I'm here to kind of like move it forward, right? To come up with an idea, try to generate documentation, right? Kind of propose it. And I think it's fun actually kind of talking to other people and just thinking about ideas, like talking about ideas and like, how can you make it better? Oh, hey, did you think about this, right? Maybe there's a gap, there's a block, right? And try to kind of figure that out. But, especially now that, companies are streamlining, right? It really is like you have to work, you want to work with just people in general, working with like other teams that you might not have, had exposure to in the past. Mm-hmm. But now it's like it's easier to do that, right? To kind of like expand and be, I mean, there's always like global opportunity expansions. And, I do feel like our company is going to become more global moving forward too, right? And then when it gets to that, these ideas, kind of go back and forth between like different countries, which is great.
I think being able to brainstorm ideas with other people, having there's no bad question type of mentality that really helps drive innovation internally. And innovation could be really small, in size. It doesn't have to be something grandiose, right? It could be just a mindset as well.
Right.
Before we jump into the Q&A stuff, and we have some questions coming in. What innovative projects are you working on right now that you can share? And is there anything that you could talk about in terms of what's like on the roadmap, on the horizon that you could share with us?
Yeah, I think innovative. I mean, I can't go into like super details, and the reason why, but I mean, a lot of it is really kind of expose our product to different customer bases, mm-hmm. right? We have this like population, that goes on Amazon or like iTunes, right, to kind of purchase movies. But like, hey, is there any other populations that we're looking at? And how do we kind of facilitate that experience for them, right? How can they get closer to that transaction with the title? It could be bundled with other products. It could be like new technology, right? I think it was last year, CES, they talk about new technology, glasses, right? Or even like contact lenses where you can like view movies and video. Like, that's crazy. But that's also super awesome. Like how genius is that idea? Like, you don't have to take anything with you. You can just put in like a contact lens, right? And then you can watch a movie or a TV show. I think those are kind of ideas and projects that we kind of look at. Some are like a little bit long term, like maybe like 5 years, kind of down the road. Mm-hmm. But I think right now, it's a great time to kind of explore, right, and discover, those technologies and how does it kind of contribute and support our business streams, right? How can we use that technology to get in touch, with those populations, that might not be able to, or people without internet, right? How do we get movies to them, right? And we talk about that. There's a lot of events happening in the world, right? Underprivileged, and we think about those things, right? How can we get our content, in front of people, for whatever reason, and at the end of the day, we want to entertain people, right? We want to entertain people. We're a studio, we create content. How do we drive that content? I'm super passionate about movies and like TV shows. I love my job, and I'm a user. I'm a user on my own, right? So I can think from like that perspective. So not just like a product guy, but also like, hey, I'm a customer at home. What would I want?
Right.
And that's kind of where the ideas come from, and that's kind of where, when I'm pitching new ideas, like where it generates, where it can ideate.
That's awesome. From a personal perspective, where do you go to learn about perfecting your craft? Like, how do you get better? Do you have any mentors, anything like that you could share?
Where do I go? Well, I'm definitely I try to keep up to date just with like current events, right? So I read like tons of articles, attend info sessions, conferences, there's a lot in LA, right? So, it's not happening right now. I mean, there is. There's a lot of virtual conferences and I attend a lot of that,
Okay.
right? And, there's a lot of great internal tools, that NBCU provides. We have access to like LinkedIn, learning, we have like Harvard Business Review, classes that we can take. So I think it's really great. But for me, I think, just kind of get better within my role. And, my role is kind of like multifaceted, right? So I do presentations, I write documents. So, I think like even presentation, I used to go to Toastmasters. I don't know if you heard of it, but it's kind of like making your, kind of being a presentation leader, right? Because that's necessary, for someone, especially like me, like always kind of like pitching ideas like left and right. So that's another way to just try to practice and try to make sure that, when I get that opportunity, I'm able to communicate effectively and clearly. I have mentors at work, right? So that they're definitely people that I look up to and that I respect, right? And I have like coffee chats with them, a few times a year, just kind of get their insights, feedback on some of the questions I have, maybe some challenges or maybe some ideas, right? And I think you get to learn a lot, from those people. I mean, I kind of consider myself a mentor as well, right? Just in that, I mean, there's people that come to me, right? I mean, it could be like college students, people in the MBA program. It could be like coworkers kind of asking me different questions. And, and that's kind of where going back to like, I mean, you can learn from anyone, right? And everyone, really. Everyone have a different background. Everyone has a different perspective on things. Everyone's a different customer, whether it's like, pertaining to leadership, to technology, to, to like various ideas. You want to, I'm always a big proponent of like just kind of higher learning. You always want to learn, right? I'm a student for life, pretty much. That's how kind of I call myself. Like I want to learn just kind of everything that's out there as much as I can. I mean, but this is not just a professional thing. It's a personal thing too. I want to grow personally. So.
And that's great to hear. I mean, the fact that you're passionate about the space and you love what you do, I think it just comes naturally. It's very fluid. Like you don't have to put a lot of effort into it. It just kind of, happens.
Yeah.
Before we jump into the Q&A, quick fire questions I had, one-liners before we wrap up here.
Yeah.
What would you say are some things that you would recommend to innovation leaders that they should immediately stop doing in their organizations, like starting tomorrow?
You mean stop doing? Is that what you said, or start doing?
Stop doing, and then I'm going to ask about start doing.
Okay.
Maybe you could
stop doing. Yeah. I mean, like, I guess, I mean, just from a technology perspective, I think sometimes we dwell on technology that might not have the most value, right? That drives business, right? I mean, we all get excited about like new devices and gadgets, right? iPhone comes out every year, or something's like faster, quicker, something's more efficient. But I think as a business, we also have to think about, hey, that's cool. We saw it at CES or something, right? Is that going to support the business? Or is that just something that, oh, it's cool, it's exciting, it's compelling, but like it doesn't really move the needle? I think that, I kind of see that discussion sometimes, right? Online in articles, within the company, like, hey, what, we kind of look at a technology, we spend a lot of time on it, but then eventually, we realize that it might not be the best fit. It might be the best fit in another industry, right? But maybe it's not the best fit in our industry. We'll just kind of move on with it.
Okay.
I think it's you have to kind of, as you grow, like within the industry or company, you just have to be better and more comfortable at letting things go. If it's not working, right? I'm not saying, like, I've definitely held on to stuff like in the past too, right? But then, like, especially now, you have to think about that more and more.
Awesome, amazing. Thank you so much, James. Lots of great insight. All right, I have a couple questions. We'll see how many we get through. So
Sure.
first one I have. Are you ready? So is
maybe
how will changing consumer habits drive new content development?
How will changing new consumer habits
drive new content?
I don't know if we're changing, right? Our industry is changing consumer behavior, right, directly. I think it's really like what's going on around us. But I think we have a hand in shaping it, right? So we see these like setbacks or challenges, blocks that people are accessing. We're like, hey, we can provide this. Hey, we can provide that. And I'm sure you're aware, Aram. There's been a lot of like watch parties, right, going on. Because kids can't get together. There's like risk, and that's something that multiple studios and companies provided at the beginning, right, so that people can kind of get together, watch a movie, TV show, and just kind of text and talk to each other over whatever device. So to me, it's like it's not about we're driving them. It's like, hey, we're supporting them. We're providing these tools to support them on their journey, right, to these experiences, right? And then, kind of going back to the KPI, once we get a decent population, we'll build something else, right? We'll build like this new content, different kind of content that they'll be excited about. But I think a lot of it is kind of proving it out, right? I said before previously that, hey, we don't know when this whole thing's gonna end, right? But if it ends next year, like maybe things are just back as usual, right? Why we want to invest like a lot of resources and budget on something that might not last, forever? Who knows? Like it's very fluid out there right now.
It's really interesting. It's a great segue into another question that just came in.
Yeah.
Which is, what advice would you give to people specific to content distribution in regards to should we keep dropping dollars into ads versus influencers versus events? How does NBC think about distribution?
Yeah, we do. We have obviously a very robust, very smart marketing, global brand marketing team. And actually, a good example that I can bring up, we have a new title coming out next year, right? Got pushed, Fast and Furious 9. Like everyone's kind of aware of that. We just had this huge, sessions, right? Just like brainstorming sessions on, hey, how are we going to promote this, right? How are we going to drive, this on the different platforms? How are we going to, because it's a global product, right, for us, right? Because they travel everywhere and it's so diverse. When we talk about it, we talk about the idea on different ways, whether it's, I don't know about your area, but, the drive-ins, interactive drive-ins are getting super popular, like within LA at least. We talk about, and then, we talk about different ways to kind of visualize concepts and then kind of push it out there. And, whether it's like through ads, through email blasts, throughout traditional retailers, to try to incentivize people, to come and watch our content.
Wow, that's really interesting. Okay, a couple more.
Sure.
So here's one. How do you pursue maybe I could join two questions here. How do you persuade leadership to invest in you and your team in the sense of moving? And then there's another question is like, how do you move the needle on your idea execution process?
That's a great question. And I think just based on my experience, right, kind of going back to the idea and if it really, the idea itself have to kind of like drive the needle, right? You know, you need to understand what the what leadership is looking for, right? And everyone have goals, right? Digital distribution have like goals, right? You know, whether it's like financial, whatnot, and how does your idea support that goal, right? And then, and what are the numbers behind it? I mean, like, I think numbers is, you know, super important, you know, so, you know, I know for previous, previous project opportunities I was thinking about, I think I spent, you know, like 10, 20 hours just on the numbers, just trying to scope it out, you know, just about, hey, you know, historical data, right? Kind of translate that into, hey, I mean, there's always going to be some assumptions, right? Especially like when you go into a new space. So there's going to be some assumptions within your estimates. But you just got to think about, hey, there's a population, you know, multiply that by, you know, maybe historic data, right? And what kind of number does that prevent? I mean, not prevent. What does that, what kind of numbers can you assume that would get get leadership executive excited, right? Is it like, you know, in the first 3 to 5 years, you can generate $10 million versus in the first 3 to 5 years, you can generate $1 million. Like, where their head at, right? Are they just thinking about, oh, you know what? $500,000 is great, and we can go with that. But then if you're pitching something that's like $500,000 revenue in the next like couple of years, and they're thinking like, oh, we need like 50 million, then you know, there's no alignment there, right?
There's no alignment, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean that comes from experience too, right? And it's kind of knowing your business, and which I have to do as well. You know, it's just kind of, you know, working here for 4 years, but it's really like very specifics, right? Just be able to answer all of your questions that your leadership's throwing at you, and making sure that you can prove everything out and be like, hey, you know what? This is idea. This is what we're targeting, and this is the way to get there.
Right.
And be confident. Be confident with their idea and presentation.
Oh, that's a great answer. Thanks, James.
Yeah.
We'll do 1 or 2 more depending on time. There's a question. Does NBC have a 5-year, 10-year innovation plan? If not, like how far ahead does your team plan?
5-year, 10-year innovation plan.
I mean, how, like right now, how far ahead can you really think through? Is it like 1 year in advance, 3 years, 5 years?
Well, I think this is kind of like my past experience working with that tech team, right? So, I mean, I know we've discussed, you know, like a couple years down the road, right? I mean, even with like budget, you know, we think about 3 years down,
okay,
right? So I'm not on the tech team, but I am, you know, pretty sure that they have a 3 to 5 year plan in place. 10 years might be, especially now, I think 10 years is probably a little too far. And not just because everything's just so fluid, right? I mean, you don't know what to expect, what's going to happen next year or 2 years from now, right? I mean, are we going to have, you know, budget for technology, for marketing or whatnot, right? So you can't really go out that far. But I think, you know, typically, you know, when we look at, you know, business, it's, you know, you have 5 years for sure, right? I mean, you have a 5-year business plan, but from the technology innovation side, I think it's a little less so. I mean, you know, there's new technology popping up everywhere. So you just don't know sometimes as well, like what's going to be successful and what's not. And sometimes, you know, we look at our competitors, right? Like what are they using, what are they offering? And, you know, we just kind of keep ourselves, we're kind of monitoring the industry about those kind of topics. Correct.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Last question and then we'll wrap up.
Sure.
Do you have a quick or scrappy framework you use to vet an idea internally prior to presenting it to the greater team? Some like, I don't know, litmus test approach or something like
that. I do have something. I mean, it's on my computer, obviously, that I kind of like look at. I mean, if anyone's interested, and I'm happy to share, right, you know, after call, if anyone's interested, I can kind of kind of talk through it as well. But yeah, I mean, I do have a tool, right? I mean, I do have something, some kind of template.
Yeah.
And I know this question came a little bit before, so maybe I didn't speak to it directly, and I apologize. But I definitely have a template on like, hey, you know what do I have to cover? You know, like to kind of determine if it's worth it, kind of a deal, right? So that's a lot of, there's some numbers, there's some research, and it's kind of going through different models as
Right.
well. So yeah, so definitely, you know, if you want to, you can get in touch with me.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, James, that would be amazing. I'm sure people really appreciate
Yeah,
it.
for sure. And you know, I have an open door policy, so you know, definitely willing to kind of, you know, speak about, you know, whatever questions that you brought up, but also anything else moving forward if it helps.
Wicked. Awesome. So I think we're close to time. So I'm just gonna uh, wrap things up. So James, you've been incredible. Thank you so much for giving me your time and all this knowledge. I'm sure people will love it, and hopefully they could use it in so many more companies. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you joining and being our third participant on this Fireside series. So thanks so much.
You're
Um,
welcome.
the next steps is we're gonna clean up the video. We'll send it to you, James, just so you can review it, see it's all good, and then we'll share it with everybody. Everybody who's participating or sign up will get a copy of it, and we'll be publishing it on our YouTube channel. To plug in the next one that we have. So as everybody knows, these are kind of every Thursday around the same time. Our next event is next week, essentially. We'll be chatting with somebody by the name of Keiichi Matsumoto. I hope I got that right, at Yamato. Yamato is one of the largest companies in Japan. I think it's about 100,000 employees, if not more. It's a large organization, and we're going to be talking about integrating your corporate innovation with other departments. So his role there is the manager of digital innovation, which was new that he took over. So we'll be talking about that. So stay tuned, more details to follow, and everybody can register.